Right, hello, thanks for joining me. You know you're my favourite, don't you? Yes, you. Don't tell the others, though. We'll just keep that between us. In the meantime, who's wrong on the interwebs? Well, 2 for 1 today. What fun. We're dealing with our good mate Thomas DeLauer, who we haven't dealt with for a while. And he's talking with Salad Boy, Rat Features, whatever his name is. Let's see what they say. And let's see if any of it's any good. Or otherwise, shall we? What fun. All right, off you go, Thomas and Rat Boy.
But I think the biggest thing for me that I've changed my mind on since I wrote the book in 2019 was carbohydrates.
Yeah, right. Okay, so here's a bloke who had it right in the first instance, i.e. the exact amount of carbohydrates a human being should consume on a daily basis is none at all, ideally. He wrote a book to that effect, as good or otherwise as that book may or may not have been, depending on your beliefs on that book. I haven't read it, by the way, and I won't be. And then he's changed his mind after having written a book. Actually, probably by way of being credible, Paul, the thing to do is to actually get your ducks lined up before you open your mouth publicly and make sure that your first public statement on a topic is correct so that you don't have to change your mind. Now, as it turned out, by pure luck, it seems, you had it right in the first instance in terms of the amount of carbohydrate a person should eat. Now you believe, falsely, that you had it wrong then and now you've got it right, when actually that's not what's occurred, Paul, at all, I'm sorry. By the way. Just gets worse, doesn't it? Every month. It's rapid, isn't it? Rapid. Okay, right. Go on, tell us about carbs though, Paul.
And then in connecting with that, the ketosis and ketogenic diets. So when I wrote the Carnivore Code, and this is humbling, this is what we all do, is we write—
No, this is not what we all do, Paul. This is what you did.
Books, and then you put your thoughts into cement, you freeze your thoughts in kryptonite, and then you change your thoughts and you think—
Yeah, but the thing is, you see, that's why you make sure that your thoughts are correct and indicated in the first place before you freeze them in kryptonite, so that nobody can come back to you later and say, oh, look at that book you wrote, it was so stupid. I don't know, I haven't read your book, Paul, but it said we should eat a carnivore diet, which was sensible. I believe it probably also said you need to eat nose to tail, because that's what you've been parroting since you started the carnivore thing. And you were wrong about that, Paul. But we should not be eating nose to tail. Humans are not only specialized to the carnivore diet, they're specialized to the eating of muscle meats and associated fat, almost entirely with very, very little to no organs at all, Paul. That's what you actually did wrong. It wasn't the fact that you weren't consuming enough carbohydrates. No.
Oh, the book, it's just not a living document. So, but when I wrote the book, I was of the opinion that carbohydrates were not great for humans.
And that was correct.
We're sort of looking at the literature differently. And
No, Paul, we've seen your attempts at looking at the literature. We've seen you attempt to talk about science publicly to people. And I've pointed several times to your absolute destitution of competence to read scientific literature. Entirely. On several occasions. People should go and look those up. They were great. They were great videos. They didn't get nearly enough views, I thought. Go and watch them, everybody, and tell everybody else you know to watch them too. That would be helpful.
Time I learned personally in my own life doing a carnivore diet of meat, organs.
Yeah, see, that's the problem, Paul. There. That's the bit that needed to go.
And fat and salt for a year and a half, that including carbohydrates in my diet.
Specifically, Paul, if you want to be specific, the problem was too much liver, Paul. Way too much liver. That's what screwed your health up. Not the fact that you weren't eating carbohydrates. Dear, oh dear.
Improved my health from there. So my whole story is that I was eating kind of a paleo diet, had really bad eczema, which I'd had my whole life. Getting rid of vegetables and—
Is that a question?
All plant food significantly improved the eczema, so much so that in the last 4.5, 5 years since I've been on this more specific path, I haven't had any flares of the eczema that are significant at all. That was a big deal because I had massive eczema on my elbows, my wrists, my hips, so much so that I really couldn't even wear pants easily. It would get on my shirts. I couldn't do jujitsu because I had eczema on my knees and it was getting infected. So getting rid of vegetables really helped with my eczema. But then I learned—
Is that a question?
for a year and a half that I was getting such bad muscle cramps, heart palpitations, sleep disturbances. My testosterone was kind of going down, right?
Yeah, Paul, go and look up some of the symptoms and presentations of copper toxicity. See what you find. Also, once you've done that, go and look at how much copper you'll find in liver. And then tell me that it was still a good idea to not only eat tons and tons of liver, vastly more than you'd find proportional to an animal, but also to concentrate that into a pill form and sell it to people while all the time working with a man that you knew damn well, Paul, was lying to your face about taking PEDs. All right? You knew.
Now it's around.
Oh, he told me he wasn't, and I believed him. Paul, you're supposed to be a physician. Hello?
700 or 800. I've included carbohydrates in my diet for the last 2.5 years. But at that point, it was going 450, 500, it was significantly lower. And my sex hormone binding globulin was creeping up. So I had
So what?
electrolyte issues. And what
Yes, you did have electrolyte issues, it seems, Paul. Yes. 2 issues which I've multiple times on my channel pointed out to you. Too much liver and not enough protein in one bolus for you, Paul, for your requirements. Those were the sole things we needed to sort out, and your problems would have been ameliorated completely. That's why you come and talk to someone like myself who knows something about this, Paul, rather than guessing yourself and suffering from one of the most severe cases of Dunning-Kruger I've ever actually seen, Paul, believing yourself to be competent, A, to read scientific literature, and B, to comment on human nutrition. 2 things in which you are absolutely untrained. Do you see me running around trying to play amateur psychiatrist, Paul? No, because I'm not trained in that.
I realized was that I'd been thinking about insulin wrong. I'd been thinking that I needed to keep my insulin low all of the time. And
well, who told you to think that? Because that's not correct, Paul. I never said that.
to be fair, on a carnivore diet, my fasting insulin was low, 3.5, 3.
As it will be, yes.
0.0.
Hello, Thomas. Nice to see you. Check your email, son. I haven't had a response from you on the last email. It was about it being probably time that you and I got this Cerule thing moving, because you are a registered affiliate for Cerule products. They are what they say they are. They are absolutely fantastic. And I think it's time you mentioned it on your channel. All right, here's the address for anyone of Thomas's that's watching. This is where you go to get Cerule products from Thomas. There it is. All right, what's next?
And I thought incorrectly that if I ate carbohydrates, my insulin would spike, and that would be a bad thing, right?
Yes, a spike is a bad thing, Paul. Multiple spike. Well, one single spike, no, probably not. Fair enough. Multiple spikes, not good. We know this. It causes all sorts of problems to the tissues of a glycation nature, Paul, and it makes you look like you've aged 10 years in the last 2, for example. That can happen to a person, any given person. I'm not suggesting that happened to you necessarily. But anyway, what else?
After today's video, I want you to check out.
Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about, Thomas. I know this video is about 5 months old, but you've been a registered Cerule affiliate for longer than that period of time, and Cerule does carry a very good collagen peptides product, and you should probably be promoting that. Here's the address once again for any of Thomas's people who think that they should go and buy a really good collagen supplement. Right, what's next?
If you're consuming collagen protein, which honestly you probably should.
Yes, but you should get it from Cerule, I think, personally. Of course I do. But anyway, any of Thomas's people that want to get collagen peptides product from Cerule, once again, here's the address. Any of my people, here's my address for the same product. Right. What's next?
As well. So if you're trying to add it into coffee, it makes it a one-stop shop. But collagen is also tremendous for sleep, and I've talked about that in other videos. Anyhow, I popped a link down below. You can use that code TOM, and that'll save you 20% off whatever you want from. Again, the code is...
Any new customers of Cerule, no matter who your introducer is, if you use the code SAVE25 anytime before the end of March 2024, then your first order, you will receive 25%. Awesome.
And that link is down below in the top line of the description.
What I realized, and I wasn't taught this in medical school, was
or much else apparently either, Paul,
that insulin spikes after you eat carbohydrates are actually healthy for the human body for a variety of reasons.
they're not spikes, Paul, necessarily. More like sleeping policemen than spikes.
So insulin is probably something else I've changed my mind on, carbohydrates and insulin. What I realize now is that your body needs an insulin signal after a meal.
Yes, but it doesn't need to be a great big dirty spike, Paul. A little bump will do the same job. How do I know? Well, I've been doing it myself for years and years and years, and so have many, many other people. Those people generally, is the word I'm trying to get out, are people who are not abusing their bodies with too much copper, poisoning themselves or with a toxin. Of course, with toxins, it's the dose that makes the poison, but no, pretty much any level at all above the required copper level can start case by case to present a person with some issues, Paul, like the ones that you outlined, as it turns out that you were experiencing as part of your daily life when you were poisoning yourself with copper. What a shock. All right, what is next?
When you eat carbohydrates, to signal to the kidneys to resorb and hold on to minerals, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium.
Yes, we know what minerals are. Thank you, Paul.
So the massive, profound electrolyte problems that people get on long-term ketogenic diets.
So who are these people, Paul, other than yourself? And do they universally abuse their bodies with copper toxic tissues from an animal that they ought not to be eating?
Are almost certainly due to a lack of insulin signaling at the level of the kidney.
Yes, everybody has an individual threshold for a signal in insulin every day or at least every other day to keep that kidney tissue viable in terms of its ability to filter those electrolytes back in. Yes, we understand that, Paul. But it does not need to be a great big dirty spike. Still, someone that's not meeting their threshold, maybe they're eating their protein in 2 meals when doing it in 1 would be a better idea. Maybe they're simply not consuming enough protein to get this done. Depends, of course, individually on their circumstances, doesn't it?
Various levels of kidney physiology upon which insulin is going to act. But people in the ketogenic space, I think, are well-intentioned and they're trying to hold on to minerals by including massive amounts of salt in their...
Yes, but people who are in the ketogenic space are also people who think you should stay in ketogenesis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, and are worried about being kicked out by this or kicked out by that. These are people who are not doing themselves any favors. This is not a good idea. Every time you eat a meal, it should be enough to kick you out of ketosis for several hours, at least, every single time. And that should happen once a day, ideally. So long-term ketosis? No. The longest ketosis that I would advocate for would be the longest period of fasting that I would advocate for on a case-by-case basis, and that's 5 days. Okay, what's next?
Diet, but it just doesn't work because you need an insulin signal at the level of the kidney.
Yes, we agree, Paul, but it doesn't still need to be a great big dirty spike, which is what you will get if you use carbohydrate to achieve it.
To hold on to those things. So the first thing I did when I sort of transitioned off a ketogenic zero carb, quote unquote, carnivore diet was include honey in my diet. And the first couple of days I felt a little weird because I was physiologically insulin resistant.
Yes. Well, yes, if you accept the construct of insulin resistance and you understand that it is a construct, not a physiological response, not something you can put a meter on. There is no meter that's been manufactured by any company for this purpose because it simply is not a physiological response. It's a construct. It's an idea. It's a thought pattern. Okay? If by insulin resistant you mean your body was not, or your muscle cells mostly, were not accepting glucose readily, fructose straight to the liver, handled differently, glucose delivered to the muscle cells from honey. If those muscle cells are not accepting glucose right now because of the Randall cycle issues, because they are replete with fat energy already, then your blood glucose will elevate in the face of you releasing insulin to attempt to poke that sugar away. What's the cure? Don't pour the glucose in. It's not necessary. What's necessary is to stop poisoning yourself with copper, I would suggest, or that's what was necessary, and probably to eat a bit more protein and fewer times a day, Paul, as I've said. Those things would have sorted your issues out.
And then your body kind of adjusts to this. My blood sugar spikes normalize. And, if I eat honey today or a few years ago after I had...
Well, which, Paul, today or a few years ago?
Adjusted to having the carbohydrates back in my diet, my blood sugar might go to 130, 140, 150 milligrams per deciliter. But I don't worry about that, because if you look at the actual shape of that curve, it comes back down to a baseline very quickly, within the hour for sure. So this is normal human physiology, and we should not fear glucose spike.
Training status, sunlight hours, where you live in the world, activity levels, all of these things will have played into that. There's nothing surprising in any of that, Paul. But you still haven't given us a reason that we need to consume glucose, because we still don't.
In a metabolically healthy individual, it's going to go up, it's going to come back down. That's normal.
How would you define metabolically healthy, Paul? That's also a construct. And your construct may be fallacious. And I'd suggest it is.
That insulin signaling is healthy for humans.
Yes, and an insulin signal is required, as already described more than adequately, yes.
At so many levels, it's healthy for our hormones.
Yes, but still, you're now conflating the need for an insulin signal with the need to eat carbs. And that's a false conflation, Paul. We still do not need to eat any carbs ever.
It's healthy for our brains. It's healthy for the production of glutathione and the resorption of minerals. So that idea of insulin being all bad all the time.
Well, who said that, Paul? Whose words are those? Not mine.
And including carbohydrates in my diet, that was a huge, huge thing. And now we know. I mean, there's tons of research that I just didn't see at that point.
Yeah, but Paul, you're completely and utterly incompetent to read research. You've shown that multiple times, remember? I'm sorry, you do not have the skills to read this stuff and come to a sensible, rational view on it.
That I was sort of blind to about carbohydrates for athletes, carbohydrates post-exercise. I mean, we just worked out. I have holes in my shorts now from the weight belt.
So what?
This weight that I was using has ripped a hole in the front of my shorts here. And carbohydrates post-exercise are so clearly shown to improve performance. Carbohydrates overall.
Oh my God, Paul, seriously? You're also not an exercise physiologist. Another skill set that I actually do have, Paul, and that you don't, as well as the ability to read science and competently critique it. Let me be clear. The requirement for exogenous dietary carbohydrate is exactly the same for an athlete as it is for a sedentary person, and it is still none, ever. You do not need carbohydrate to optimize your athletic performance. Fact.
All are shown to improve all sorts of metrics in humans: testosterone, recovery, sleep, all kinds of things. So those are two big ones for me from the outset.
Now, on the cramping side, I've got a question. As far as, because I've experienced that when I'm low carb, right? I'm very, very prone to cramping, which as someone that does a lot of endurance stuff, it's problematic. Like if I'm backcountry or anything like that, I was just doing a long trek and ran into a huge cramping issue, even though I'm not super low carb anymore. I guess I'd still lowish carb. And I would argue that it actually takes time to actually like recover from some of that insulin issue that you have with the kidneys. But the question that I've always had, and maybe you know the answer, since protein is insulinogenic, can you get some resorption of the minerals through the insulin spike with protein, or does the glucagon cancel that out in that case?
Right, well, I can answer that question before Paul even attempts it. And the answer, Thomas, is yes. Yes. Perfectly sufficient thyroid and kidney function is not only possible demonstrably, but it also makes perfect sense using simply the gluconeogenic response to those gluconeogenic amino acids. Yeah, I'm an example of it. I can point you to hundreds and thousands of others who find the same, actually.
I mean, you get some, it's just nowhere near. If you look at the amount of insulin and the level of insulin you get with carbohydrates, it's more.
Yeah, but now the fallacy, Paul, is more is better. Because it isn't better, Paul. Huge spikes in insulin indicate huge spikes in blood glucose. Huge spikes in blood glucose are definitely, demonstrably, absolutely cause and effect problematic, Paul. Still.
It's much higher than it is, which is protein. I mean, you get some with protein, it's just not the same as a carbohydrate.
You've said that, Paul. We got it the first time, and it's not an issue. We get enough. Clearly, those of us who are not poisoning ourselves with too much copper.
Spike. And so people in communities that are fearful of carbohydrates will say, look at how much insulin you're getting. And that's good. You need that. And so
no, you don't, Paul. Still. No.
So people understand this also. Like when you don't eat carbohydrates, you become insulin resistant. This isn't.
Yes and no. We get this. We get this. You get a large amount of your energy from fats. That means your mitochondria will be using mostly fat, i.e. that'll be what is flowing through those mitochondria, i.e. those cells that are using that energy will, to some degree, have sugar locked out. Yes, because that cell is replete with energy and does not require glucose. It is protecting itself from damage by not allowing the entry of glucose according to its concentration gradient in the blood. It makes perfect sense that each individual cell needs to look after its own requirements and be able to lock its doors from the inside, should it not like the conditions outside. Okay? And so what?
It's not the pathological insulin resistance of diabetes.
There is no pathological insulin resistance, because insulin resistance, Paul, is not the etiology cause of diabetes type 2. The cause of diabetes type 2 is elevated blood glucose. The symptom is elevated blood glucose. The diagnostic criteria is elevated blood glucose, and the ameliorative process by way of pharmacological intervention is to lower blood glucose. Okay? Goodness gracious.
Diabetes, which is different physiology that I can describe. This is the
Paul, you couldn't describe the differences between your anus and your elbow if I labeled both of them and taught you how to read, son.
Insulin resistance of physiology, basically historically, evolutionary. This is starvation insulin resistance.
No, it isn't. It's nothing to do with starvation whatsoever, Paul. It's to do with the utilization of different substrates by the mitochondria chronically on the basis of what the diet is. Here's the clue that what you're saying is ridiculous. The diet determines this, not fasting.
Meaning that you are physiologically insulin resistant. Your body is saying, hey, spare the glucose.
Right, because as we evolved through deep time, let's say at least the last 350,000 years, there weren't too many carbohydrates available to us to be had. Our food source was meat and animal fat. Pretty much everything else on the planet was covered by sheets of ice several miles thick, most of it. Okay? For God's sake.
Any glucose you're getting, spare that for the brain, the adrenals, and the gonads. And
right, because it was such a rare treat. Then we had the agrarian revolution, turned our nutrition on its head, and it's the second worst thing we've ever done as a species diet-wise. The worst ever being adding seed oils to our diet. No, don't do that. Now we have carbs available to us 24/7. Doesn't mean that's what we should eat, because it still isn't.
Maybe the red blood cells, don't put it in the muscles. That's physiologic insulin resistance, and that's what you see in people who are low carb or zero carb or keto, and that's why the first time someone like that eats carbohydrates, they may feel very strange. Or the blood
right, because they'll get a hugely elevated blood glucose. Very, very toxic.
Sugar may go up. This is why a woman who is low carb will fail a glucola test in her pregnancy, because that is physiologic insulin resistance. And I actually have come to believe that's not a good thing. I don't think we want to be physiologically insulin resistant. It is a...
Well, you know better than 4,500 million years of evolution, do you, Paul? Somehow. A bloke that can't even hold an idea for more than a couple of years before he has to change his idea to suit, I don't know, is it actually maybe that someone's paying you, Paul? I don't know. Because I actually find it difficult to believe that you genuinely are as lacking in stupid as you have made yourself out to be in the last several years. I find it difficult to swallow that you really are this poor in terms of your general comprehension or intelligence level poor, because you sound stupid. What's next?
A historically, evolutionarily adaptive thing.
Evolutionarily?
For extreme situations, but I think that humans...
So now, Paul, what you're saying is you also have absolutely no idea about the development track of human beings over the last at least 350,000 years. As well as having no idea about science, how to read papers or remotely competently critique said papers. Wow.
Do better. And I've come to see carbohydrates as a signal of abundance. I mean, if you go to spend time with the Hadza or the Maasai or the Samburu or...
What have these particular tribes of people got to do with the price of fish in China in 1965 or anything else, Paul? And we know exactly how long you spent with these tribes. You sat with them for about 10 minutes for a photo op. Then you pissed off to go surfing or something.
The Khoisan, I mean, these tribes invariably seek carbohydrates, and they...
So did our ancestors, Paul, because it wasn't available to us often. It doesn't mean that we should consume a pile of it, because we're not adapted for that. We should not do any such thing.
Celebrate it. They don't think, oh, I've had 100 carbs today already, I'm not going to eat this. This
is just facile, ridiculous nonsense, Paul. You're not building a good argument here. What you're doing is reinforcing the knowledge that anyone with more than 3 brain cells has already got, which is that you have no credibility at all, Paul. None whatsoever.
When I was with the Hadza, we found a beehive, and they just went off on this thing. I mean, I got a big chunk of beehive and ate it with the larva in there. And
and you think they do that every day, Paul? Wow.
The honey, and it's amazing. And
they did that because you were there.
3 Hadza guys that I was with were probably ate 60, 70% of the honey in this hive, and then shared a little bit with their comrades when they came back. Say, hey, we found a hive. Here's a small amount for you guys. But they'd eaten a ton of this stuff. So historically, I think humans had massive exposure to carbohydrates when they...
Well, you're wrong, Paul. Wrong completely, because the stable isotope testing tells us exactly what the dietary makeup for human beings was right up until, well, currently, but right up until the agrarian revolution, where it changed completely. It was very, very stable for 350,000 years, and it was 80% upwards, the flesh and fat of animals. The other 20% was largely fibrous, rooty, tubery type materials that they dug up out of the ground, which did not break down to carbohydrates because they didn't much have starch with them as they do now that they've been selectively bred to be much more starchy, etc. These were rooty, fibrous things that humans could subsist on and break down to a very small degree according to the very, very limited capacity of a human being to ferment fiber in the hindgut. And we got some short-chain fatty acid out of that. Not carbohydrate, Paul. Okay, so wrong. Completely wrong.
Where they could get it, as much as they could get it.
Yeah.
They didn't fear it at all.
I would agree. I mean, I definitely feel like, to say that carbohydrates aren't evolutionarily correct is invalid.
No, it isn't, Thomas. No. It's absolutely valid. We have the slam dunk. We have stable isotope testing, which tells us unequivocally, definitely that means, Paul, without saying, oh, but we're not sure. They are sure. We know what humans have eaten. Carbohydrates are not evolutionarily consistent with our biology and physiology at all. Sorry, just the facts.
I mean, I think there's always access to them at some point, one way or another. So
and humans are seeking them. If we don't have...
Because we're hardwired to, for the exact reason that they were not available often.
We're seeking them. If we can't find...
It's the dose that makes the toxin, Paul. A hit of carbohydrates rarely is not a problem, for goodness sake.
Find them in berries. I didn't mean to cut you off, but if we can't find them in berries, if we can't find them in honey, we're going to find them in roots.
Yeah.
These days, yes. Not back then, Paul. Once again, showing your ignorance.
It's a piece. Just like, I mean, it's interesting. It's just so intuitive and simple.
Oh, right. Intuitive and simple. I think we know what it is that's simple, Paul, or who it is that's simple.
We're looking for animal
I'm starting to be more and more convinced every time I listen to you, Paul. I'm starting to be convinced that you really are this fucking stupid. Stunning, really.
protein. We're looking for nutrients and organs. That's clear. We're always eating the whole animal. But the next
No, not true, Paul. Again, simply not true. Wow.
thing, I think in tandem with that, we're also seeking carbohydrates as wild humans. We've forgotten what wild humans look like because we all, except for maybe a couple thousand people on the planet today, live as semi-domesticated humans. But it's very clear. I mean, if you look at the Hadza, so there was a PhD.
Again, what has that got to do with anything? The Hadza are a modern people, Paul. How do I know? They live now. You're talking about how they live now. This has nothing to do with evolution. You buffoon.
Researcher who actually spent a lot of time with them and gave them surveys of these nomadic tribes and said, what are your favorite foods? And there were 5 foods that were their favorite. So there were.
What has their favorite food got to do with the price of fish in China in 1965? Not a damn thing. I could list you 5 of my favorite so-called foods, all of which are absolutely contraindicated and bad for a person. All things a person should not eat. Goodness gracious.
There was meat, there were berries, there was baobab, there was tubers, and I forget the last one, I'll think of it in a moment. But
honey, was it, Paul?
Honey was invariably the first thing that they wanted. Both men and women ranked honey as number 1. And
so?
Men said meat as number 2. Women ranked berries, baobab, and tubers, I think all about the same. But in both groups, the roots were sort of the last thing that they wanted to eat.
There you go.
Wow, man, that's wild.
But both of them really, that was the favorite thing for them was honey.
I mean, it makes
So, still?
it's delicious.
They celebrated
It's so?
more than anything, right? And if you look at these people, there are tons of studies of them, of their cardiovascular health. They're not, they have insulin sensitivity, which is amazing, which is exemplary. They're not insulin resistant. They're not diabetic. They're not obese. So
They're also not eating honey every day, Paul. Remember, they did that because you were there.
I mean, my own anecdotal experience, I don't eat an abundance of carbohydrates, but I've added honey and fruit in, and my insulin sensitivity has improved on my lab work. So, I mean, it's...
by fasting insulin.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so what? I thought more was better, Paul. Which is it? You can't have it both ways. My word. Absolutely ridiculous from start to finish.
Which is perhaps the most clear metric you could ever use.
Well, there you go. So there's Paul just completely contradicting himself. More insulin is better, said Paul. And now he's confirming Thomas's idea that because his fasting insulin is now lower on lab, that he's in a better position. No. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Okay. Join me next time when someone will be wrong on the interwebs, because it really doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon. And I think we should all teach Thomas a lesson, those of us who have come across to watch this video, Thomas's people. Go and teach Thomas a lesson. Go and buy a rule off him. Those of you that have watched my video, teach me a lesson. Buy a rule off me. Right. Okay. That's it. See you next time. Ciao for now.